Welcome in, everybody. This is Dynasty Mode, the unofficial EA Sports college football game podcast. But remember, EA, it doesn't have to be unofficial.
That's
my
right.
name, my name is Arky Shea. That is Dimitri Ravanos Dimitri. I cannot wait to do today's show because it is moments away.
Yes, because if you were to wait any longer, we would be wasting each other's time. No, I really loved the column that our guest Chris Vannini wrote for The Athletic because I think it is everything that is this show, right? Like there's a little bit of news in there. There is a whole lot of like what this means to the people he talked to personally. And there was some great information in there about what this game meant to EA. So I think this like absolutely hit the bullseye of what we've been going for ever since we started this show.
As soon as I saw this pop up on my feed, I bookmarked it. I sent it to you. I just said, start reading it because I've already started reading it. And I was excited to sort of find out what we could find out. And there are a lot of really good anecdotes in there, too, I want to talk about with Chris as well. But I think we should probably welcome in Chris to do so. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's bring him on board. The name of the column at The Athletic is EA Sports College Football, the rise, fall, and return of a beloved video game. Chris Vannini, thanks so much for taking time for us, man.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Happy to be here.
So there are...
Wait. Can I start with this opener?
Yeah, please.
We only talk with people who are interested and not interested, love this college football game series. We don't want just stuffies reporting news and getting out of it. So, Chris, before we move forward, are you an NCAA football video game diehard?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Course.
We can go.
Of course. I think my first one was Joey Harrington, which I think was 03.
Okay.
I think it was 03. It came out in 02. It was 03 game. And then I had everyone after that. I still have my Xbox 360 and my PlayStation 2. In fact, those are my only new systems. Just to play those games. When the pandemic started, I rebought 09 for the 360 and I bought 05 for the PlayStation 2. And used to do that all the time as a kid. Me and my buddy would always do that thing. You got to take over a 1-star program in Dynasty mode, and then you build it, and then you got to build it up together and go from there. So,
hell yeah,
absolutely.
Real quick, I do want to say for people in the podcast description as well as the YouTube description, we'll have a link to Chris's article so you can read it there at The Athletic. It's a really fascinating piece and really good stuff.
There's a lot to get to that really jumped out to me here, but because you mentioned Joey Harrington, Chris, as being your first game, you talked to him for this column. And in it, he talks about that this is how he saw a lot of stadiums for the first time. And it really stood out to me because I've got a buddy named Josh Pacheco. He does sports radio on Oahu, right? And he grew up in Hawaii, grew up in one of the more remote islands of Hawaii. And this game is how he learned what Roll Tide meant, what Boomer Sooner was, all those sorts of things. And so it just jumped out to me that story seems to be across all spectrums. If you loved this game really taught you something about college football.
Yeah, it taught me so much about college football. I mean, when I started to watch more games on TV, I'd be like, "Oh, I remember that fight song. I heard that thing, and now I know what school that fight song goes to." You learned who the good players were. You know, when you're in middle school or whatever, and you don't have the bandwidth to follow everything, you kind of pick it up from the game. And Joey Harrington was one of those. Deuce Vaughn, the current running back at Kansas State, told me that's how he kind of learned what the penalties were, and he learned kind of how to make play calls. You don't throw it deep on 3rd and 1, and,
right.
and stuff like that. And actually, after the story ran, I heard from a sports information director who runs the communications for an FBS program, who said that when he took the job that he currently has, he learned who the players were through the game, because you can still obviously get updated rosters at elsewhere, and he still plays the game with the updated rosters. He took the new job a couple years ago and went through the team on the game to figure out who was good and who was and everything like that. So even though it's been years, it still teaches people about the game.
Power 5 or Group of 5? What's that SID?
Group of 5.
Okay, interesting.
Look, I think for that level, this game is even more valuable for that reason, right? Like, I don't think I would have known that a program like I don't know, like Texas State even had its own stadium if not for this game.
Yeah, and it's funny going back when I bought the old games and I went back and I found Arkansas State. I'd forgotten that they were called the Indians
Right.
back then. They're the Red Wolves now, so I had forgotten about that. And like I put that in the story, but like a lot of people learned about college football through that game. And Peter Moore, the former president of EA, told me, he's like, every single year we would do research, and every single data point showed that the game made more fans. And I
Yeah.
talked to somebody else who worked at EA who said, like, every pro sport understands this. Like, every pro sport knows the importance of their video game to their sport. And college football has missed that for 10 years now. Like, an entire generation of players now didn't experience it, didn't get into the sport through that. And that hurt the sport. Like, I think the fact that the game is coming back will simply just help the sport from that perspective.
So you mentioned Peter Moore, and Peter is talking about what video games in general mean to the sports they are portraying. And certainly this was understood by EA, because there was a time when EA, I think, had literally every sport under their umbrella. What I found interesting was something he told you about what this game meant to EA. He said this sort of kicked off the sports video game season at EA. That was sort of the way that the NCAA football game was viewed in-house.
Yeah, I mean, NCAA came out before Madden every year, and so that was kind of the way that they looked at it. It wasn't as big of a seller as Madden, as FIFA, as these other ones, because those were international games. Really, college football is not an international sport, so it was unique in that way. But it wasn't underdeveloped by any means. I mean, you had arguably more detail in that game than any other game that they have, because you've got more than 100 teams, 85 players on a roster, all these different songs, stadiums, cheerleaders. Like, it's not like Madden where you can just paste over one team with another and it's the same thing. Everything about college sports is unique. And that's the emphasis about this game, is that they have taken so many photo, video, and audio assets to include in this game, from stadium angles, from songs to play at the beginning of the fourth quarter, fourth downs, alternate jerseys, just all this kind of stuff. And Peter told me, he's like, the people who worked on that game were college football fans. They appreciated that you had to run the wishbone if you were at a certain school, or the air raid if you were at another school. And talking to people at EA, they put together kind of a team like that again.
It looks like you could still play NCAA 14, and you could play a revamped version of that NCAA revamped, a modification of it, where you can download onto your 360 or your PS3 or your PC, which is where I have it right now. And they do a lot of those things. They've updated a lot of stadiums in there. They've updated a lot of jerseys and stuff. And I've seen where EA has actually hired some of the people that worked on the modifications of the game while it was in its absence to be able to work on this new game, which is interesting to me, Chris, which I think is part of the heart of what your story is, that there is so much love for this game and people that care about this game, including EA, who always sort of felt like this game was coming back once they got through the legal course and found a way to give money to players, is that this was a franchise they never wanted to die. They want it to continue on because it's, it does make money, but it's also a very beloved series. And there's not a lot of games out there that are actually like just beloved like this. And that's something that shines through when you talk to a lot of the people in your story.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to do this kind of holistic story. Look, Matt Brown at Extra Points has done a tremendous job from day one about all the updates on this game. Brandon Marcello at 24/7 Sports did a great story about what's going to be in the game. I wanted to include that and did, but I also wanted the whole story of this game, which was how it came up and why it went away. And it went away because they couldn't pay the players. And now we've got NIL in college sports. And these are things that EA 10 years ago said in a court filing, they would be willing to pay the players to be in the game. And the NCAA said no. And so Peter Moore was like, look, the NCAA was dealing with all sorts of stuff about NIL paying players, and the video game was like exhibit A. It was the clearest, point right there. And they couldn't handle being in all these different lawsuits. They weren't even going to be making money on the game, so they had to drop it at that point. They didn't want to, but that was what the NCAA kind of put them into. So now that NIL is here, now the players can make money, now the players can be in the game, that's finally coming back. And they obviously saw the headwinds, saw where that was going. And that's the story. The story is the rise, the fall, and the return of the game. And it's been 10 years. And the feedback on this story, the fact that you guys do this podcast just goes to show how important that game was to everybody.
I do think it's real quick, if you don't mind, to beat you just for a second.
Go ahead, please.
Because you talk to current players and to players who maybe just recently have sort of gotten out of college football, and I would think for a game that came out in 2013 that there would be fewer and fewer players like that would be as fond of remembering this game, or even have access to it. I mean, we're talking about kids born in the 2000s, for crying out loud at this point. So, but what seems to be fluid throughout your story is that no, that's not the case. These guys still found this series, still have great memories of this series, and still are really attached to this series without any chance of even being in the game up until we saw the NIL legislation start to come down over last summer.
This is, before you answer, Chris, because this is what I was going to ask too, and I just want to recap for people that in the article, Chris, he already mentioned on this podcast that Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State is a part of this. Bijan Robinson from Texas is somebody you talked to, and there was a clip that went, viral-ish, let's say, from Big Ten media days of someone asking CJ Stroud what his rating would be. Like, that jumped out to me too, given the age these guys were when this went away. They still are very familiar with this game.
Yeah, I mean, like Spencer Sanders, Oklahoma State quarterback, told me, he's like, when it went away, a lot of us just kind of transitioned to Madden. But they were 10, 11, 12 years old the last time the game came out. You say a couple years after that, it's still in the ethos. So it's a lot of when these kids were getting into football as kids, that the game was still there or was recently kind of around. And the point about CJ Stroud and the ratings, like, look at what ESPN does with they made like a whole show about the Madden ratings for players. Like, talk about creating content for your sport and getting people interested in your sport that's more than just to play on the field. Like, that's the kind of thing that's been missing from college football for so long. Who's going to be the cover athlete? What is my rating going to be? All that kind of stuff mattered to those guys back then. Joey Harrington was one. Neil Brown, the coach of West Virginia, was another, who was like, I knew that when I made the two deep as a player, I was going to be in the game, and that was really cool. Technically, they weren't in the game, and that was the whole problem. But it was it was the number, the skin color, the measurables, the hometown, everything but the name. So like it meant a lot for them to be in the video game, and that's what Kirk Herbstreit. When the game went away, he said it's Ed O'Bannon's fault that this game went away, and Ed O'Bannon did not want the game to go away. Again, he wanted the game to stay. He just wanted players to get money to be in it. But Kirk Herbstreit also said, I don't know any players who want to get paid to be in the game. They just love seeing themselves in the game. And there is a little bit of truth to that. Like, I don't think there weren't necessarily scores of active college players at the time, demanding that they get paid for it. They were just kids who wanted to be in the game. And I think that's what the current players are excited to see.
That is, to your point, I told this story last week. I went to college at the University of Alabama, and one of my good friends from high school was on the two deep on the offensive line, like just plagued by injury. So he was never a starter, but because he had so many injuries, he was there long enough to be in multiple games. And I would just murder him every time we played this game together, to the point that I would take the avatar that was supposed to be him as a guard and put him in at running back just to prove that how much better than him I was at it. And he used to tell me, like, he used to be very upfront to that point of like, I know that's not me, but that is me. And this kind of hurts my feelings. You need to stop doing that to me. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I don't remember this at all, and the timing, you mentioned that now ESPN does reveal specials for Madden ratings, who's the cover athlete, all that sort of stuff. There was a time where they were also televising the Madden Bowl. Like, as a, not live, but it was a series that they had broken it up into. And around this time, the college video game is also having these big events. They weren't making it onto TV, but you talk about Joey Harrington going to an event and playing Madden with the members of NSYNC. But this event was for the college football game. Other celebrities, other former players are showing up. Deion Sanders, Steve Young are mentioned as coming to events for the launch of the college football game. I'm just sort of surprised as somebody that really, really loved this game that either A, I missed this, or B, EA and other college football media outlets didn't make a bigger deal out of the release each year.
Well, the Joey Harrington anecdote, he was in Jamaica that was actually a Madden launch party, but he was invited as the cover athlete that year.
Gotcha.
I had to, that was originally the lead of the story. We eventually kind of shifted it around, but I had to have that in the story. There is no more early 2000s like image in your head than Joey Harrington and NSYNC playing Madden together.
Yeah.
And it was
probably arguing over who got to use Michael Vick.
He didn't remember who it was. He just said he knows it wasn't Justin Timberlake. So that was hard. But I also mentioned like Jared Zabransky talking about a launch party in New York when his game came out. I think it was 2009. But there used to be a college football video game tournament. Didn't last very long, but there was one of those in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think. So there was a lot more I had hoped to have in the story, but just for time's sake couldn't put it all in. But as for why some of that stuff didn't make press, I mean, it was the early 2000s. We didn't have social media. It was hard to follow things sometimes, I think. But I've had that image of Joey Harrington in my head ever since I talked to him.
It's got to be Chris Kirkpatrick, right? He's the most forgettable member of NSYNC.
I would think. I mean, you've got a 2/3 chance of getting it right at that point.
There was a Chris Kirkpatrick in NSYNC?
Yeah, he was the one with the black and white braids.
I bet he was.
Come on, Archie. Know you're in sync.
Yeah. I know my Backstreet Boys. I don't know my NSYNC.
Fair.
Chris, I'm interested in a couple of newsy parts of what you wrote too, which is one of the things that you wrote about is that it seems to be that there's going to be some exclusivity toward the next gen generation of the console, next gen console, which basically means the brand new PS5 and the brand new Xbox Series X something. I always keep forgetting what that is. But that is something we've sort of been trying to find out if that was going to be compatible with the Xboxes that are out now or the PS4. But it seems like from what you're hearing and from what you were talking about, that this will be sort of exclusive next generation. Am I reading too much into that, or is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, that is the plan. I mean, if you think about it, by the time the game comes out, it will be 2023. We will have been 2 or 3 years into those systems now by that point. And I know, you'll see a celebrity get hacked on Twitter and offer to buy PS5s or something like that. But I might need to hit one of them up because I actually don't have one of the new systems yet, like I mentioned. So I'm
same here.
On top of getting the game, I'm going to have to drop $500 or whatever it is for one of those systems, which I'm not. Which I think a lot of people, will too. I mean, like you just said, like a number of us who were really into that game and not much else kind of didn't keep going, and so it is expected to be only the next gen consoles at that point.
It's funny you bring that up because we've been talking about that like. This podcast is born out of not being gamers, but being specifically fans of this game. I went out and bought a PS5 because I did not want to be faced with the lack of a PS5 next year when the game is out. Downloaded Jedi Fallen Order, and it may be the first non-college football video game I played in 2 decades. Honest to God.
You got to play something until then, right?
Yeah, exactly. And might as well pretend to be a Jedi.
I have another newsy question, if I could ask, that you were writing about, Chris, in the article. So there has been, and every time I post a TikTok of a clip from this where we're talking about this, or post it on the Twitter, or just even talk to it about it, our YouTube channel gets a lot of it, comments on it as well when we bring this up. So I'd like to see if I can get some kind of clarity on what this might mean. But the Madden engine, right? That's what everyone's scared to death of, this quote unquote Madden engine, which we've talked about before. It's really the Frostbite engine, but everyone, since we're talking football games, calls it the Madden engine. And what you're writing is that there seems to be a lot of bluster coming from EA, and maybe it's hopefully true, that this won't be just a Madden reskin. Like, this won't just be pumping out the same Madden with just college football teams. I didn't hear a lot of bluster like that trying to get ready for the new Madden release to say, hey, don't worry about this engine. But I'm hearing it about the college game a lot. So what do you hear as far as what that means when it's not just going to be a sort of a Madden reskin, and we should be worrying about the Madden engine as much as they're trying to continue to develop this game for next summer?
Well, look, I mean, the games have always shared a lot. I believe they've always shared the same engine anyway, but it never felt like a Madden reskin in the old days either, and so um, that was something emphasized by somebody I talked to around the game, who was like, "This is not just a Madden reskin. Like, we are truly making this a college game." Now, there are issues obviously with the Madden engine, and one of the things I took away from researching and talking to people for the story is that making a game is very, very hard. That was something that they wanted to emphasize, and that like you constantly have to be thinking about how somebody is going to try to break the game. And you may think, oh, we want to put this in the game, we want to put this in the game. Well, what's a reason not to put it in the game, or what's something to prepare for because someone's going to do something you didn't expect? And you got to kind of be prepared for all of those types of scenarios, and gaming out what those scenarios are is tough. So yes, glitches will constantly go viral on social media and clips and stuff like that. Oh, this weird thing happened. That's the kind of thing they really don't want to happen. And so they have to, that's why it's going to be basically a 3-year process to have made this game. Because as someone told me, like, if it was just a Madden reskin, the game could be out by now, but it's not. And so that's, I think, I understand there's obviously a lot of concerns about it. We have nostalgia for NCAA football because it was so long ago, and gaming has very much changed since then, and the reviews of Madden have gotten kind of worse and worse over time. So that is an understandable fear, but I think they understand that.
But when you're hearing that from them, and it's a are they coming when they talk about them not being a Madden reskin, right? Like, are you asking them about that? Or are they trying to point out, like, are they quick to say, "Hey, listen, Chris, there are people that are worried about this. We're trying to make this very, very different, and not to feel like that. People are going to continue to say stuff like this." But are they pointing it out specifically to you, out of, I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but sort of going out of their way to tell you this?
I asked if it would be on the Madden engine.
Okay.
They said, yeah, but it's not just going to be a Madden reskin. Basically that's kind of how that went.
All right.
And Brandon, Marcelo, and Matt Brown have kind of reported the same thing. I know they understand that there's a lot of concern from people about that.
Right, and I think that's the thing that's positive when you think about it. They know what we, as gamers or fans of the football games, think about the Madden engine, and they want to try to be proactive with that. So it feels like that's at least a positive notion as we continue to go forward, Dimitri.
I think I would add that it's good that they recognize that we want this, whether the Madden engine is great or not. They recognize that this game was its own thing, and there were plenty of us that did not have this and Madden. Like, this was a big deal to us, and we want it to still be very much its own thing. One of the things, Chris, you have in the story that jumped out to me is this game, when it comes out next year, could already include the expanded 12-team playoff. And what
Hell yeah.
I found so interesting about that is, now granted, when a game does not come out, it could have been anything, right? Like, there are a million stories about what NCAA 15 was going to be. But one of the things that I kept hearing over and over again was that it was going to be a little bit more open in terms of how you ended a season. So is this just EA getting ahead of what they know is coming, not having the game feel dated so quickly? Or, like, did you hear anything along the lines of, we're looking at a system where you could choose to end in a 4-team or a 12-team playoff, or maybe even the old BCS system?
Well, I don't know about choosing between them, but it's still TBD on if that will happen. Okay, so my regional conversations happened before the 12-team playoff expanded. I've been putting most of the story together before then. Then the playoff news comes down. I go back and say, hey, is this something like you guys are going to consider? And they're like, yeah, it's no final decisions on everything, but we're going to keep this as up to date and as realistic as possible. The playoff expanded could come as soon as 2024,
right?
Which, if it's the NCAA 2023 game, 24, how that works. It's unlikely the playoff will really expand that quickly, but we also don't know when they'll make that final decision. as someone who has covered every single college playoff meeting here in Dallas, it's been a lot of wasted time. But so it could have the 12-team playoff. It may depend on when we know it's going to be implemented or not. There are a number of things still to go with this game that are up in the air on whether or not they will be included. Mascot mode was another one of them. That was something I brought up because my brother had come over a couple weeks prior. We played the mascot game against each other on the 09 game. And so I asked if there'd be mascot. Like, maybe. Like, we're still working a lot of that stuff out. So, like, they got to build it and then see if it kind of fits before they kind of make these final calls.
I guess so. This is sort of a build off of that, because you also mentioned that there is a lot of concern that we are going to have a lot of in-game purchases be necessary to actually be able to enjoy this game. You know, whether the 12-team playoff is included in this version or it's just something they know they're going to have on the horizon, did you ever get the feeling, or maybe even hear directly, that for the first, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 versions of this game, once it is relaunched, it may be more updates rather than a brand new game every season?
There will be DLC downloadable content that comes with that could include updated rosters, that could include a lot of different things. That was, as someone who hasn't played many video games over the last 10 years, that was something that jumped out to me when talking to people who play these games, and talking to Kofi Yaboa with SB Nation. He was like, I hadn't quite realized it, but just how much those microtransactions are prevalent in what was FIFA, in what was Madden, and that has become a way for EA and video game companies to make a lot more money on the game than just the $60 you shell out for the game. So he was concerned. He's concerned that the new game will have a lot of that microtransaction stuff, because that's what a lot of the sports games have now. I imagine it. I didn't hear it from anybody at EA at the time, but I imagine there will probably be microtransaction DLC type of stuff, just because financially that's just kind of the way sports games are now. How much of that, I don't know. What kinds of stuff yet, I'm not sure. But it is something I think for the people who kind of have been out of it for a while, and we kind of think back on that old game and how much we liked certain things, that it is a different kind of world now in gaming.
Let me ask you this from a personal standpoint. We talked to Matt Brown early on in this podcast about something like FCS teams, right, as possibly being future DLC. You know, whether it's a package for all the FCS teams or certain conferences in the FCS or whatever. What would you be willing to pay for that's extra? Not the price, but like what do you think that wouldn't normally be in the game? Would you be interested in? Would you be willing to pay extra for mascot mode? Would you go for that mascot mode a little extra, Chris? Come on now, a little extra $12. Come on.
Personally, I'm someone who's pretty cheap when it comes to a lot of that stuff.
Same.
I don't pay the extra upgrade. I don't do those kinds of things. So probably not personally, but maybe that's something they decide to look at or not. I don't know. It would kind of have to be on the moment. It have to be kind of on what the price was, I think. So
it's very interesting to see the way these things are done now, that so many games are downloads as opposed to having to go buy the physical disc. I mentioned playing Jedi Fallen Order is the first, video game I played in a long time. There are 2 price points on the PlayStation Store. There's the download, and then there's the download with all the DLC already unlocked. I mean, I think we could probably see a situation, right, where this game comes out at that $69.99 price point, and then once, say, spring practice opens, then that $99.99 price point with everything unlocked hits the PlayStation Store, hits the Xbox community, all of those places.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like, yeah, rosters could be updated, various different types of things. It's like
realistically, who's in the transfer portal right now? I think is another one.
Like again, I don't. Again, it's still far away. That I don't think they really know. Their plan is to include a transfer portal, but how exactly is not clear, because you don't want to have a situation where somebody can get all the best transfers. So is that its own thing, like recruiting? Is it like free agency in Madden? You kind of got to figure that type of stuff out. But when it comes to the DLC and what you're willing to pay for, yeah, back in the day, you would unlock that stuff because you got the cheat code from somebody, and like that was the way you do it. And eventually the games figure out, hey, we can just charge people for that. and so that's kind of what you got now.
Chris, if I were to tell you that you have to buy the PS5 right now, but you're going to choose, and it's only for this game, but you're going to choose the either disc version or non-disc version, which would you choose? Meaning, do
So
you want to go hold that physical copy of this game being back for the first time in a decade? Because that's the situation I feel like I am in right now, and I could use some advice.
I think I would.
I would too, right? Like it
I
kind of
mean,
feels like it needs to be back in my hand.
right, like learning about, again, as someone who wasn't into gaming for the last 10 years, like learning that, oh, my brother's got the Switch, he downloads all these games, like, oh, you can just download it over whatever then and have it. But I don't know, what if like you got bad Wi-Fi connection or something, like you want to make sure you have everything. I'm not someone who did a lot of the internet gaming, playing each other on NCAA or Madden. I typically just did my own Dynasty modes or played with friends, so I didn't do it that much. So having the physical game to me is something I want to hold. And I say this as somebody who used to work in a newspaper and now works at an online website. It's cool when you see your name in print or you hold something that you wrote, and it'd be cool to hold a game.
As the father of an 11 and a 13-year-old, boy, gift-giving occasions are very different when there is nothing you can wrap up for them and everything is a download. EA Sports College Football, the rise, fall, and return of a beloved video game is the name of the column at The Athletic. Chris Vannini, man, thank you so much for taking the time.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Chris Vannini from The Athletic. Man, I really appreciate his time. I know you do too. You guys go back longer than he and I go back. I mean, I've known none of them for a long time, but it's a really good reporter, a really good writer, and I like the way he approached this story. And we even got a couple of newsier items that I don't think people like. Here's the thing: when we're talking about articles like this, because there aren't a ton of them being written,
right?
So there are people who are focused on this because other people want to talk about, I guess, coaches getting fired and stuff. But this, for us, is what's majorly important. And sometimes, you get news. You have to read between the lines to get the news that you think was kind of reported, but not sort of confirmed, to then confirmed.
So Chris, for people that don't know, is a college football reporter at The Athletic. His specialty is the G5. It has been the G5 since before he was at The Athletic. And I mean, man, what better beat for a reporter talking about this video game to have come from, right? When you think about how many of us start our dynasty modes at an Akron, at a Georgia State, at a UMass. Like, I love that that's the guy that went really deep getting people prepared for the new version of the game. You know what's interesting to me, and he mentioned this, and we have talked about it before. He briefly mentioned this in the article, but then you and I talked to him, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of hesitation. Like, he did mention that the game is supposed to come out next year. It's really interesting to me how much that is getting worked in more and more to the conversation about this video game.
Yeah, Dimitri, it's coming out next year, and I'm not going to hear any more negative talk, even though we do keep hearing the. Because again, if
you and I are going to go down to Florida, we will kick in Tiburon's door and just tell them, just give us what you have. We're here to take it. Just give us what you have.
What you have today, okay? We've given you the second Tuesday in July.
That's
Give us what you got. We'll work on it. We know dudes who can mod this. All right, we'll finish get the finishing touches. I don't want to hesitate on that anymore. That makes me feel sad. But I do. It is worthy of note that EA has essentially said nothing since they've said we're excited to come back. They've not said July 2023 is going to be when they come back. We're sort of just piecing everything together slowly as we go.
I don't know how much I read into that, only because we know they've hired a team to work on this. And Chris points out in the column, they've hired PR people for this. Like, that seems to be a late stage thing you do. So we must be way down the road, at least at EA headquarters. They must be way down the road.
Well, as if we've talked to people before, if they're so willing to, or not willing to, but if they could have put out a game this last year, this summer, whenever they got the announcement of NIL, then that means we can't be that far away, and we do seem like we're in more of a polishing phase, right? Than we are sort of a grassroots build it up from the bottom kind of phase, which to me would seem to indicate that we are still heading toward a next July release.
I mean, even if it is into August, like your point is very, I think, very well supported. That like this isn't going to be a sprint to the finish, right? We might not get the finish line that we thought we were going to, but it's clear they have made progress on this thing.
Dimitri, you willing to pay for a mascot mode?
Not for a mascot mode, no.
Let's say the game comes out and it's $30, but there's no Dynasty mode. You have to pay $30 for the Dynasty mode. We're buying it?
Yeah, done.
Okay.
Look, right. Arky, you're talking to somebody that paid for the full edition of that Jedi Fallen Order, so I had the option to have an orange lightsaber.
Well, look, first of all, it's the coolest color for a lightsaber. Okay, I don't know why it wasn't standard. Oh, that's right, to get your money.
That's right.
But it would be weird to have a PS5 in your house for like a year and not play anything on it at all, right?
There was a real genuine concern from my wife of, if I get you this for your birthday, you are going to do something with it,
right? Okay. Before we get out of here, Manscaped.com is a presenting sponsor here this week. Manscaped.com has been very nice to us to give me very intricately noted items for cleaning up areas. Dimitri, just briefly, do you know what my son just had his 2-year birthday this last weekend, right?
And you got him a Manscaped razor.
I got him a Manscaped lawnmower 4.0 is what I got him. Listen, I know I see it every day. It's coming in like the Dickens out there, literally. And I told him
more like the Dick outs.
Dimitri, what are you doing? We're at birthday number 2 for child number 1, and the wife kind of wants to look at number 2, and the only way she's going to look at my number 1 is if she can actually see it through the brush. You know what I mean? So that's why I use the lawnmower 4.0 to try to get that girl pregnant now. You know what I'm saying?
I like it.
I feel like it's they always say like correlation is not causation. I think this is causation. I think she gets pregnant because I've trimmed up the hedges around the mailbox here, and now you can see the fence posts, which is nice. So by the way, you don't have to just get that. You can get the magnificent performance package 4.0, which does have the lawn mower 4.0 trimmer. You know the interesting thing about that trimmer, by the way, Dimitri, is that it's got a 4000K LED light.
I really love that.
I have thought about, and I think I might do it.
What if you want to shave your balls in outer space? You got to be able to see them.
I think I want to be able to shave it in the dark. Just like, why have the tool if you can't at least play with it a little bit,
Arky,
right?
Listen. I appreciate the innovation at Manscaped. I do. This feels like your scientists were all about coulda. They never stopped and thought shoulda. Like, this feels like playing with fire, Arky. Only in this case, it is a razor near your dick.
Well, it is a razor, but it's not the razor. It's got the proprietary advanced skin-safe technology. You're not going to get those nicks, those tugs, those snags anywhere near there. You could do it in the dark with your eyes closed, and you're going to be fine, probably.
No,
probably. Maybe. I don't recommend it, but use that 4000K LED light and leave the light on. Leave your eyes open, I should say.
Wow.
Anyway, you go to manscaped.com, get the Performance Package 4.0 right now. Use our promo code Dynasty Mode. That's all one word. There it is on the screen. Dynasty Mode, all one word, and get 20% off plus free shipping. Folks, if you don't buy it, Manscaped goes away. That's the rules, okay? So you buy it, you use our promo code, get 20% off free shipping. That is absolutely the best deal you could possibly get on this. So manscaped.com, promo code Dynasty Mode. It's all one word, 20% off plus free shipping. Dimitri, as we get out of here.
I got to do my tagline, Arky.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Manscaped. Every penis should be aerodynamic.
I like that.
Yeah. Reduce drag.
I think we're 3 weeks in, and I think that might be your best one yet.
Thank you. It's the first one I've incorporated science into.
It is. Actually, it is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. I had to go think about the first two, and you're right. It's science with the advanced skin safe technology, and cleaning your pecker area.
Yeah.
All right, Dimitri, that was a great podcast. I really enjoyed that with Chris. I really enjoyed hanging out with you, and I look forward to doing this again next week on this here podcast. But until then, we got to say goodbye to the good people.
Save and sim to next week, everybody.